Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I have the opportunity to work on an older Shimano. This is the Shimano 400S. It's the graphite type of a reel, single ball bearing, and just running a little bit sluggish. I think this came in from Rick or Rich, if I remember. And we're going to show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to keep it running. So this reel's got some pretty heavy line on it. I noticed that on the spool when I was putting the elastic band on it. I'm sure it's for surf fishing, and we'll show you how it gets serviced. So while I take the parts off the exterior, I want to suggest to all of you to come ahead and subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please hit that notification button. My channel is an education channel. I try to teach everybody how to service the reels for themselves. I also get into a lot about the reel manufacturer, the type of reel it is, how it performs, the type of fishing, and so on. So if you're interested in that kind of a fishing exploration and understanding from an education standpoint, please go ahead and do that subscribe and the notification. Well, this reel looks like it's been around a while. It's got a lot of UV fade on it. It's got some pitting going on some of the metal parts, some greening up on the bail and the like. But overall, it's still running, and I'm interested to see just how well it performs. So we take the handle off on this one with a non-handle side screw that allows us to pull the handle through. And now there are 4 screws that hold that side case on. And sometimes you have to look under that side case because that may not end under the rotor. It may go up and under. And if it does, well, then you need to remove the axle shaft and the rotor before you can remove the side case. In this situation, it just looks like it's straightforward in terms of the 4 screws. So we're going to take them off, the Phillips head screws. I said 4, there's 5 of them. I miscounted. And when I do that, I like to lay them on my desk here because I want to make sure that all of the screws are the same size. If they're not the same size, I want to note the location of where the shorter screws or longer screws belong. That way, when I go to reassemble, I will get it correct. There's 3 of them. Shimano happens to be one of those manufacturers that just likes putting smaller screws in certain locations. So pay particular attention if you're working on a Shimano reel. So this reel is probably 1990s. It's the graphite reel, and you had a lot of reels made in Japan, Korea, and the like that jumped on the graphite bandwagon. And when they did, you started seeing the change in the case design. It went from a metal rounded case to a kind of a flatter, more formed case. And the designs pretty much kind of tell what era it's from. Now today, of course, they do a lot different in terms of designs. Before I go any further, I want to knock the anti-reverse off to the other side. That way, if there's a spring or there's something else in there that gets interfered with when I'm taking the case off, well, you've taken it out of the way by removing that piece. All right, the screws are off. The side plate should just walk right off. And it does, and this is kind of what I was feeling when I was testing the reel. Just dried grease contributing to that sluggish performance. This says a single ball bearing. I don't know if we have a bushing in here or if it's the case that's acting as a bushing, so let's wipe that away and see. But we have a rubber or a plastic bushing in here. I don't even know if I can get that out. It's been lodged in there for a while. I want to get it out because there's something I want to show you on it. Yes, it's a plastic bushing. See those 2 tabs? Those 2 tabs ride on the top, and they ride in this case right here and here. If for some reason, I'm sure if you've taken it out to do the cleaning on the bushing and that, you must make sure that those tabs go back in those slots. Now they're only a thin tab, but that will cause the reel to malfunction. Generally, you'll put it in and the reel will be very tight to wind because the excess space on the reel here, just that sitting a little bit proud, will be enough to put pressure onto the main gear, and that pressure will impede performance. Next up then, we're going to remove the screw that's holding the crosswind block and the axle shaft together. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures if you're not doing so, and particularly if you're unfamiliar with the reel, because when you open this up you want to note things like parts orientation. For example, this crosswind block is flat on the top and looks like the letter T. It's very easy to invert that and put the screw side up, and that'll cause the reel to fail. Alright, I'm going to hold the crosswind block now to remove that axle shaft. That should pull up and out free and easy. I'm going to wipe that down to get the old greases off of that. And if you notice that it was struggling coming up, it would mean that you have a bent axle shaft. There is really no solution to a bent axle shaft. You could try to straighten it, but it's hard. You generally wind up better replacing that axle shaft. Alright, the caramelized grease here is the cause of the performance issue, I'm sure. I'm going to just wipe it off the side here. And as we look underneath, you can see there's very little grease in the teeth, and everything is spun internally, I'm told, by centrifugal force. It just, the way that that gear is spinning, it's going to throw the grease off. Notice on the back end of this that we have a little shim washer there. So you want to make sure when you go to reinstall that that shim washer is in place. I didn't notice a shim washer on this side. So the factory uses shim washers to true up the performance and the alignment of the gears. So it won't necessarily be on every reel that you'll find a washer in one place or the other. I'm now going to use a hard brush to pull the dried grease out of the teeth. When I'm pulling that dried grease out, I'm checking to make sure they're all even, that they're not pushed aside or bent in any way, and that they are uniform both that way, and looking at the peaks to make sure all the peaks are there. When I look at the peaks, I notice that I still have a little bit of old grease inside there on that channel. It's not going to affect anything, but you want to keep your reel clean and get it cleaned as much as you can during the service. When I remove the pieces and parts, I put them into a parts tray. It's been off camera. I use a fast food container, but that's always a great place to put the parts, because, well, when you go to reinstall, you won't have to go searching around your bench to figure out where they are. And if you're like me and leave parts on the bench, they generally wind up on the floor or in my tools over there or some other place. They have a habit of just kind of wandering, and I like to keep them from doing that because I don't like to spend a lot of time looking on the floor and other places for them. Alright, as we mentioned, you wanted to note that the screw side for the axle shaft is down. As I mentioned, you can easily put it in upside down. I've seen reels come to me with folks have told me that they've serviced the reel and now the reel gets stuck in performance. What did they do wrong, and so on. I've just removed the crosswind gear. This takes the energy created from the back of that main gear. You notice that we have a secondary gear back here, and that's what makes your axle shaft go up and down. You saw the bridge, which is the crosswind block that rides slot spool. It rides this way, and because it's an off-centered pivot, it rides up and down, pushing the axle shaft up and down. But we've got more grease inside, and I want to take a cotton swab, clean as much of that off as I can. And my rule with dirt and grease is use the least abrasive approach that you can. Don't go in there scraping away and using metal on metal and things like that. If you can avoid it, it's only going to serve you better in the end. Well, I noticed that there's a second shim washer here in the case. So before I go any further, I'm going to put that second one right back on that main gear again, because that's kind of the way it came. If you wind up changing main gears, don't assume that the shim setup that you had on the one is going to be right for the shim setup on the second. You have to check all the time, again, because that shim is used by the plant as a leveler to take out any tolerance changes within the reel itself. All right, well, the underside of the case is clean now. We're going to go up top and remove the rotor. And that it's held in place first by a set screw, which keeps that top nut from turning. And then I think that's probably a 12mm nut. Now on this one you're okay, because there's no lip on the rotor, or a marginal lip on the rotor. You can get away with a box wrench. Sometimes you may need to use a socket wrench because of the depth of the lip on that rotor. Check the inside and the out. This is a good time. Put some oil on the slots. There's nothing going on the left side there. Put oil the slot on the bail. You can oil that line roller. That line roller doesn't roll, but it doesn't hurt to put some oil on it. You can do the same thing with the spring and the trip on the back here. And then just work it in like that. All right, those two, I'll put those together. I'm going to put those next to my parts tray. That's a big piece to put in the parts tray. Underneath here, you're going to see what we have going. We have a eccentric driven click ratchet. We have a anti-reverse dog that when it's on will intercept and come back in. You can see how it works. It works by being an eccentric. We're going to take these parts off so we can get to the bearing and the pinion. Another good place to take a picture. So I'm going to remove the screw that holds the anti-reverse dog in place. And actually I think I can probably do the anti-reverse leaving that in place. There's a spring on it. You really don't want to go messing with that anti-reverse dog spring if you don't have to. We're going to see if we can get the bearing and the pinion gear out without moving that anti-reverse dog. This is your eccentric ratchet. This should pull up. And you can see it's a spring-loaded sensor there. And then we have two screws that are holding on the tie-down clamp for the bearing. So this does not have an instant anti-reverse bearing. Another clue is to the age of the reel. The reel was made before they became very popular. And then we should be able to just kind of walk this up here like that. Once you do that, let's clean those two pieces. Now sometimes these are different assemblies. You'll notice that we have two holes on one side and one on the other. You need to mark where that came from. And you'll notice that this is the side that has the extra pin. So when you go to install it, it's going to go on that way. And now we should just be able to pull this pinion gear up. Sometimes these bearings become a little stubborn. If they do, what you want to do after you remove the pieces, put the rotor back on. Your nut and thread it down a little bit. And then you're going to use the rotor as a knob to pull it off. Just like that. That was a little bit off camera. You didn't see the complete magic there, but that's how you do it. Rather than trying to grab this thing and kind of walk it through. Alright, well this bearing is pretty tight on this. I'm thinking that we probably have a swollen side, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to flood the bearing with oil. I'm going to grab my hard brush and pull that out. Doing the same thing I did with the main gear. Making sure it's nice and clean as I check the pieces. Spin the bearing, make sure that it's spinning nicely. It is. And sometimes it's just that there's some dirt that accumulates in here. Sometimes it actually freezes on. I think that's what we have right now. I think we have a frozen inner race. I'm looking as I turn that inner race is turning. And on a reel like this, you're not going to be able to find the replacement part. There's no sense beating the bearing up, trying to take it off at that point. Just flood it with the oil. Flood the shaft with the oil. It might break free in use. But as Sometimes, as I like to say, you let that sleeping dog lie, and that's what we did there. All right, we're going to take another cotton swab because this is a good time to clean up that grease that's been hiding behind the pinion gear. I see a lot of times folks will say that the reel has been serviced, and then when I go to do the service, there's just a high amount of just junk in the hiding behind the pinion gear, and you know that whoever did it probably just slapped some grease on. All right, I'm going to put some grease on the outside of this case just because it helps that main bearing go through a little bit easier. I'm going to turn it over so that we can align the bottom of the pinion gear with the hole in the case. And we're just going to install. Just bumped my camera. Just make sure that it sits in nicely, that it turns easily. Clean off the debris that may be on that little click ratchet there. Hold your hand on this one because that is the eccentric that's going to make this work. Notice we have a shim washer that goes on top of that bearing. And while I have this, I'm going to oil that anti-reverse dog to make sure that it moves free and easy. And I don't think that it's going to be a problem to put that washer in first. I'm going to put that clip back on. Now notice that that's offset. That's interesting. I didn't notice that the first time. It is offset. And you do need to make your two holes align there. Once they are aligned, you can go ahead and get that screw. And now I'm kind of seeing the purpose of that little stud there. It kind of keeps that first hole aligned. And grab that second one. So these Shimano reels are value priced. You can see there's only one bearing in there. But boy, the design on them was very simple. And simple wins almost every time. All right, I'm going to take the assembly with that spring for the eccentric. I'm going to load that in. Make sure that that drops all the way down. And now we should be able to run the that needs to be on this side. So we're going to lift that up for a moment. There we go. Take the anti-reverse off, we'll give it a run, and you can see how it pulls in now. Okay, very good. All right, with the drag all tightened down, you want to loosen that up so that you don't put a pressure on there to reduce the wear cycle of that. We'll put a little bit of rod and reel cleaner on here. Now this has got UV damage. You really can't do too much with UV damage, but you might want to make sure that it just stays clean as you can buff off any debris or anything that might be on there. It's always nice to use a cleaner. I use pen rod and reel cleaner for that. I'll just give it a little dry down with the paper towel. We'll give it the final test. We'll see how we did. And get this one out there fishing again. All right, just a quick ride. Rides nicely for a single ball bearing wheel. Make sure that our bail trips. Make sure that we have that anti-reverse. We do. Okay, that's it. So that's the Shimano 400S graphite era spin fishing reel for saltwater. The 400 usually means it's a 40 size. I'd say this is between a 40 and a 50 size for certain. It can be used off piers, lakes, rivers, nice casting reel, surf, and so on. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Again, if you did, please like it. Please subscribe to Second Chance Tackle and hit that notification button. So to everybody who's a first responder, essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you've been doing to keep us safe. To all, please have a great day fishing. Please keep your tackle maintained and have a wonderful day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.